And that's when that kind of thought process and that way of kind of viewing this career like really had to step up for me to be like, I have to let go because I'm putting in the work and I know where I want to be and I know the kind of general outline for what I want my career to look like, but I need to let the universe show me the way that I'm going to get there. And that the work I put in is going to manifest itself in the way that it needs to. I don't need to be in control of that.
Welcome to Femme Forte, the show that amplifies the voices of women and non-binary creatives in music and the performing arts. I'm your host, Amanda DeFries. What does it mean to truly let go as a leader? This week on Femme Forte, I'm joined by the brilliant Allison Price, an award-winning director and podcaster known for immersive storytelling and uplifting queer voices. We talk about the emotional side of directing, how to build inclusive environments, and why releasing control can sometimes be the most empowering act of all. This conversation was such a beautiful blend of heart, humor, and creative insight. You're going to love hearing how Allison brings intimacy and intention into everything they do. I had such a fun and honest time talking with them, so without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back to Femme Forte. Today we have a very special guest. We have Allison Price. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to dive in. I know who you are. We've been friends for like a year now, but why don't you tell our listeners and viewers who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start into theater?
Yeah, so my name is Allison Price. I use they, them pronouns. I'm from Washington State. I'm from Spokane, Washington. And I'm a theater maker. I'm a director. I'm a deviser. I published a book oh my goodness, like almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
Wow, time flies. And I have been doing theater since I could toddle, since I could walk. My mom had an at-home daycare and we were producing plays, and it's just a bug that bit me when I was really young. And I remember I was about 8 years old and she took me to see a production of West Side Story at Coeur d'Alene Summer Theater in Idaho. And I remember being like, this is changing my life. I'll do theater for the rest of my life. And after that, I went to undergrad and I was like, I'm going to be a director. And they were like, sure. Then I was like, nope, I'm going to do it. And then I self-produced a bunch. I studied overseas and then got my master's in directing, and I worked at the same time. So I was directing plays over the summer and I worked in Turkey and all this stuff. I got into opera, and yeah, then I graduated with my master's and I've been doing that in nonprofit work ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just to even take a step a little bit back, like, did you always know that you wanted to be directing? Was that like an itch that you had like since you started theater, or did you kind of originally focus on performance and then later down the road know that like directing was your passion?
I think as like a little kid, I didn't know what directing was. I didn't even know that was a job. Uh-huh. I think most people are like, you're like, what is a director? And most people are like, we don't know. Maybe you hire people. Nobody knows. So as a kid, I was doing a lot of the acting, but I was also doing all of the directing. I would make my little sister stand up on our fireplace, like hearth thing, and do scenes from Annie, like over and over and over. And I'd be like, do it again, but better. Like more emotion, make me feel it.
Yeah.
So I think it's always been something that's come natural to me. It wasn't until later that I found out that it was a job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so was there, I know you said you got your MFA in directing, but was there originally a concentration in directing like for your undergrad?
So my undergrad was a BA. And so I basically specialized on my own.
Oh, okay.
My department didn't have a pathway for me. They just had 2 directing classes. And then I was like, well, that's not enough for me. So I self-produced shows and I shadowed faculty members, and I found myself over in England where I got to work on some stuff. And so, yeah, I figured that one out on my own.
Yeah. So besides you directing your sister, what was the first production that you ever directed? And what did you learn from it? What was your like biggest, I guess, takeaways or really first jump at it being like, oh wow?
Yeah, I was 16 and I directed Little Women with it was in my high school, and we did the full, not the musical, there's a musical version, but we did the play, and I think I learned how fun that form of collaboration is. I learned how fun building a world that way is. I also learned, I think I learned at that moment really kind of where my soul belonged. So that felt really good to feel really grounded. I was like, oh, like I'm here with something that makes sense to me, and I'm able to exist in a space that feels really natural to me. I also learned a lot at a really young age about chaos management, because theater is just like making chaos, like, and like going through it, and you're like, we're gonna make it, you know, and just kind of like trying to make that. Oh man, I can't fully, because I was 16. That was over 10 years ago now. But I just remember learning from that process that this is where I was meant to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that, I mean, obviously, as you've learned, directing also has a bunch of different operational and logistics that need to be figured out alongside the creative, right? And so let's jump a little bit into like the creative side of things. So when you look at a script for the first time, what is your creative process like, and how are you able to kind of analyze a script to try to bring it to life into a stage production?
Oh my goodness, this is one of my favorite questions. So I read a play way more than once. The very first time I read the play, I go in with no judgment. So I very much treat it like I'm meeting new friends for the first time. And I just let myself fully feel the story. So I'm feeling the highs and the lows. If it's sad, I'm going to cry. If I get angry, I'm going to be like, what's happening? And I really go that way. And then once I read it again, I start looking at the world that it's built in. So I'm looking at where the characters are, the pressures they're under, the things they're fighting against and fighting for. And then when I read it a third time, I'm looking at the people. I'm looking at the relationships. I'm looking at who they are, how they operate, how they talk, their needs, their wants. And then when I read it again for the fourth time, I'm seeing it all come together. I'm a director who, when I read things, I feel it really hard. So I always look for like the heartbeat of the show. And oftentimes for me, that comes in forms of music. So if I'm directing a show and I cannot give you an inspirational playlist or at least one song, I actually may not know what the play is saying to me. So I have to really do that kind of stuff. And then it moves into casting, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah. And so, you know, you talk about reading it a couple of different times. Was reading, let's say, necessarily books kind of what started that process that later then turned into the process that you do now for reading like plays?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I was an avid reader as a kid. Avid reader. At one point, I was like, I'm going to be a romance novelist, like a fantasy romance novelist, and I'll write all these books. And so I was always reading. I was always taking in stories. I love film. Like I love movies. I love just, if there's storytelling, I'm probably going to be there. I'm like, tell me a story. But when it comes to reading a play more than once, that actually was taught to me in a class. So I had a really great professor, Dr. Matthew Chapman, who kind of like rocketed and like really changed how I viewed interacting with text and with dramaturgy and just like that text work in general.
And so now, kind of transitioning into, you know, you graduated undergrad and, like you said, studied overseas and then graduated with your MFA, and then now you're off into the real world, right? Where you're doing a couple of freelance gigs, you work in a nonprofit, you wrote a book. Like, where did you see necessarily your career going, like post-graduation? Was this something that you clearly saw a path forward, or was there things that you needed to learn along the way to even make this, you know, career even possible? Because one of the biggest things specifically for this podcast, as we learn, is, you know, it's gotten better, but like a job in or a career in performing arts isn't always easy.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, a lot of us have the entrepreneurial spirit to kind of find more non-traditional ways of making it into a career. But was that something you kind of have always seen for yourself, or was it something that just kind of formed over time?
I always saw myself, I as a kid, I was very clear on what I wanted and who I was. So I knew for the longest time, I knew where I wanted to be and I knew where I wanted to go. The flip side of that is I had to learn how to let go. I had such a specific and intense vision for who I wanted to be, what I wanted my life to look like, that sometimes like life does not bring that to you in the way that you expect, and you have to let go to be surprised and to find out where you actually need to be. So part of me stepping into it, especially because I graduated in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So my last semester of graduate school was 2020 and all of it went to Zoom, right? And so we had big plans of like, we're going to move to New York. Well, no, that didn't happen.
Not in the middle of a pandemic.
Certainly not. Everyone in New York was like, we're leaving, right? And, all this stuff was happening and we transitioned over to Zoom and I had projects lined up that ended up getting canceled. And that's when that kind of thought process and that way of kind of viewing this career like really had to step up for me to be like, I have to let go because I'm putting in the work and I know where I want to be and I know the kind of general outline for what I want my career to look like, but I need to let the universe show me the way that I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And that the work I put in is going to manifest itself in the way that it needs to. I don't need to be in control of that because I can't control a pandemic.
Right.
We can't control, like who sees your job application and likes you, what producer you meet who's like, come on, kid, like I'm going to make you famous. Like we have no control over that. And the most we can do is just be really kind collaborators and continue to work hard and then let life do its thing. I met a playwright who said, this industry is like 2% talent and 98% luck. And they were like, the best you can do is just keep working hard and be a nice person and the luck will find you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that kind of helped me. Cause I, at some point especially when you go into theater, you think, Broadway or bust. And you're like, if I don't make it to Broadway, I'm a failure. And I had to fight that mentality of like, well, I'm not on Broadway yet. I'm not on Broadway. And it stopped me from being able to look at the accomplishments around me and go, oh, but like, good job. Like we did some awesome stuff here. And that's how it led me into opera. I never expected to get into opera, but at that point in schooling, I was like, I have to let go. I just, wherever I need to go, I'm going to go. And then I found myself in Italy, which then led me to Turkey, which then led me other places that I just never expected. So I feel like that's so much a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can say the same for me. Some people, I've talked about this a little bit on this podcast, but I originally wanted to be a jazz studies major, and I thought that touring the world and playing drums for the rest of my life was going to be it.
Yeah.
And my dream school was Berklee College of Music, and although I got into my dream school, I did not have the funds to go. And I really thought like, oh man, because I'm not going to the school, like I'm not setting myself up for success like all these other amazing drummers that I know have gone to this prestigious school and have gone on to do tours and become session drummers and do this full time. And so, looking back on that, and especially even career changing to what I am doing now, I mean, essentially I am doing this podcast in a band and also finding ways to kind of mix music and media together, which is often very rare very rare in this industry. And so I completely understand what you mean of the means of letting go, because sometimes your life can move in a completely different direction, but most of the time it is often for the better.
Yes, absolutely. Because the things that you've been able to accomplish and the people that you've been able to meet, and that stuff you just can't control. And so I always like because I also teach directing, and so I tell my students all the time, leave room for surprises. Leave room for surprises in your creative process. Leave room for surprises in your life, because you just don't know what surprises you actually need.
Yeah. And so going into teaching, that's something that has kind of been fairly new, right?
So I've been teaching since I got into graduate school.
Okay.
But I resented it. I will tell you this. If you had met me 6 years ago and you're like, Allison, you want to teach? I would have been like, no. I had such a bias. I think my undergraduate experience was not the most positive experience, and it left me really wounded and really apprehensive towards education. I used to say that I'm good at school. School is not good to me. And so at that time, I think I just had to do a lot of healing. And I saw teaching as I would end up having to be the product of who I'd come from and the institution that I'd come from, which was not kind to me.
Yeah.
And, but now I've healed from that.
Yeah.
And I've been able to recognize that, no, like, I think good directors are good teachers. I, funny enough, was taught that in my undergraduate. I had a teacher say that to me. They're like, Allison, a good director is a good teacher. You need to come learn how to teach.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, but I did it. I was like, I'm going to, but I'm never going to teach. And so, so now I'm into teaching. I've been teaching since graduate school. And then after graduate school, I've been in and out of certain colleges teaching either online or in person, directing arts, art criticism, screenwriting, dramatic adaptation, things like that.
Being able to have a new perspective on teaching, what have you found that is most fulfilling to you when teaching your students?
Oh my goodness. They have such good ideas. And truly, honestly, a lot of it is when I go into that room, I try to be the teacher I wish I had. And I think to make good artists, we have to give, and to make like a better arts industry, we have to start early. We have to start at this level. And so it's really exciting to watch these younger people with just such a passion for kind creation and such cool imaginations, and being able to like foster that and say, you matter, your thoughts matter. Like, let's create a kind industry that uplifts and helps one another and is safe. And to see them like really be like 100%, it gives me a ton of hope for like 10 years from now. I mean, we've already seen huge leaps with intimacy choreographers and, these wonderful conversations coming up. And I think a lot of that starts in a classroom with somebody who is 18 years old, and we have a choice to make in that moment to either crush them and turn them into bitter, angry people who feel like their ego is what matters, or people who are collaborative and genuine and gentle and excited and feel like they have space and validity in a room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something I say on this podcast all the time, I'm pretty much going to sound like a broken record, but with privilege comes responsibility. And that is the biggest motto that I live by. And so everything that you're saying about teaching and really teaching the next generation and having that choice to either set them on a path for success or not, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I feel that way in the rehearsal room. I think like when you're in a position of power, that directing is, whether or not, like I was told by an intimacy choreographer, you can't nice away the power dynamic. So when you come and you're like, hi, I'm your director. Yeah. You're already seen as the boss. And I've learned that it means so much, the words that you choose and how you show up. Because it can take, just as it can in the classroom, it can take the absolute life out of an actor who could have gone on to have a wonderful, beautiful career. But if you've crushed their soul, right, then that's not going to happen anymore. And you've robbed us of somebody who has so much to give and so much to share. And so I think both in teaching and in directing, it's really like a testament to how you show up and how you interact with human beings. Yeah.
I mean, relationship management and relationship building is important both on the career growth side, but also, like you said, like at the end of the day, there is that power dynamic and there is that establishment, which, you're essentially getting the entire, cast and crew together to create something beautiful. And a lot of that will rely on the relationships that you have with one another.
Absolutely. And the tone you set, right? If I come in and I'm screaming and I'm calling people names, then boom, I've already told everyone this is not a safe space to work. And in no other, like very rare, like if you have HR, like you're not allowed to scream at people. Yeah. But theater is weird. Like the arts are weird. And we're like, that's just their process. And I am like, no, that is not their process. They need to go to therapy and need to figure something out. Yeah.
So wait, what would you say is your process and the kind of environment that you try to create, in those first few weeks?
Oh, super. I'm a really question forward collaborative director. So I love conversation. I love making silly rooms. I love rooms with energy, especially with rooms where we're doing sad plays. I oftentimes, like, the sadder the play, the more fun I try to make the room. So, because, right, you can't come in there and be like, we're doing a really sad play all the time. You're going to leave drained. Yeah. But if we can bring in that joy and that life back in, because oftentimes with tragedy, there's still elements of joy.
Right.
And so I'm somebody who asks people a lot of questions. I really love people's ideas and folding them into the mix. So somebody comes up to me and they're like, Allison, I want to try this in a scene. I'm like, do it. I'm like, go for it. And then we'll talk about it and we'll see what worked, what resonated, what maybe didn't make as much sense. And then we go forward with that. And that's really the tone I set in the first couple days is we're going to talk a lot. Your ideas matter. Your voice matters. And I'm going to show you through my actions that I mean it.
Yeah, I think in any setting, whether it's theater, professional, or even personal environment, people work better when we work in a collaborative setting. And so I love that that's your kind of initial approach, because I mean, statistically, it has shown that the best ideas come when we all work together.
100%. And I work a lot with like queer folks, and those are folks who are often told that their voices do not matter.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think a part of our like just advocacy and just part of building a better space is coming in knowing that we might be getting folks coming in with a feeling that they don't belong, that their voice doesn't matter, and that their ideas are bad. And going, okay, how can I make you feel so belonging, like so like just enveloped in safety and love, and that you just know that this is a space for you to thrive, even if we're only together 4 hours, 8 hours a day.
Right.
And I just think we have a huge responsibility to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as someone who is a queer person in this industry, have there been specific challenges that you have faced that is kind of dictated the way that you approach, you know, like you said that you work with queer people now, and so you're like, I get it, so I don't want you to have to experience that either?
Oh my goodness. Oh my good. Yes. Yes. I have a litany of things. I mean, just being like AFAB from the beginning, you know, I was constantly told, oh, you're too nice, you're too soft. I was once told that actors should be submissive and to like not ask them questions because I was being too feminine. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I've been told that I was going to gay up a project too much, so they didn't want to hire me. Whatever that means. And I'm also like, how sad for you to view the world that way, as gayness being something so terrible. Yeah. I was like, you mean I'm going to add more joy to it? Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I mean, I remember in my very early, I was 18. I was I was assisting a person directing. And every day I would walk in and she would look me up and down and criticize my outfit on like why it undermined my power. And then I would give her notes at the end of rehearsals and she would snap metronome at me to tell me to go faster. Oh. And then told me I said thank you too much to people. And I was like, I will never stop saying thank you. So if anything, these things just taught me the voices that people are combating that are out there. And it made me stand even stronger in being the opposite of that. Yeah. I was like, if these are the voices that are existing, I'm going to be I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm going to try to be as loud about it as possible. Yeah. You know?
I mean, that's honestly the way to do it. Is like, I've kind of in a way, even throughout even just being like a women drummer who's, you know, we're growing in our community, but they're still like underrepresented. But I've carried that through most of my life of always feeling the need to prove everybody else wrong and doing the exact opposite of what people ask you to do. So I understand what you mean in terms of having that louder voice and being present and being known.
Yeah, and like showing that it works. I think something great is when people are like, you're too nice, you're too feminine, this isn't going to work, like don't be this way. And going, no, actually I stand by these values, and then watching it work. Yeah. I was once like eviscerated by this one person for being too collaborative, too kind. And then the show won the most awards from that season. Wow. And I was like, we were on time. In fact, we were ahead of schedule. The people had glowing reviews on the process, and then the audience loved it. Yeah. So clearly these values that I stood by that you said were less than worked. Yeah. And they're proven. So if somebody tells you to stop being something that you value, ignore them. Yeah. It's going to work, you know. It's just their own insecurity and their own ego talking.
Exactly. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. What changes have you seen in terms of gender representation in theater, and what work do you think still needs to be done about it?
Oh, we need more new plays that talk about trans and non-binary people more than our trauma. We just need more queer joy plays. I think we need more. Yeah, I think we literally need more. We need to invest in new playwrights, and we need to invest in new work. But we have also, in that same way, we've also come a long way in things. You know, there are new ways that ways that casting is getting supported. You know, people that you would never have seen in certain roles are now finally being seen as that, right? People are breaking, hopefully, at least from what I'm seeing amongst my peers, a real big rejection against like typecasting. So Juliet has to be white, skinny, 5'2", right? No, she does not. There's nowhere in the world where she can she has to be that, right? There's been so many queer productions. There's been trans people in that role. There's been there's been actors with disabilities in that role. Like, and to see that, it just enhances the story.
Right.
And people can see themselves in it. And it takes it. Everyone's like, it's a universal story. And I'm like, not when you put the same people in it over and over and over.
Yeah.
Mix it up, get new people, new perspectives, new ways to look at it. And then it becomes universal, and then it becomes timeless. So I think in that way we've made some steps forward. But I still always think that there just needs to be more support in the new work area.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And it's really interesting, specifically in the fact that it's theater. Like, you would think that theater is like the most diverse industry possible, which in a lot of ways it is, but just like everything else, there's still work that needs to be done.
And we're still in a capitalistic society where people don't want to invest in stories they're not positive will make them a ton of money. And the stories that these producers are supporting are just your white, straight stories that have worked in the past, but they haven't given anything else a try.
Right.
You know, Hamilton blew people's minds. Right. And I'm like, yes, and we can have a lot more of that. You know, it's not just white stories and straight stories and heterosexual stories that resonate with people. Right. Good stories are good stories. So stop being afraid and start taking, it's so silly to even call it a risk, because like to look at queer stories and be like, it's a risk to like produce this is ridiculous to me, but do it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I always tell audience, like people that like want to go see theater, I'm like, go see that theater then, or go see that movie.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, go see I Saw the TV Glow. Show people that you want trans-led stories. Right. And then we'll hopefully get more of them. But that's how I feel.
Yeah. I want to circle back to specifically like your career journey. I think upon, you know, meeting you and Amanda for the first time, I was fairly impressed of hearing that, you know, essentially part of your job is to get paid to fly out to different, you know, theater companies and direct their plays and or musicals. And I thought that was really cool. And so at least for someone who has appreciated theater more as a spectator than actually being a part and active in the industry, what was that process like of like getting your first gig and then getting all these opportunities? Like, where, if someone wanted to do something like this, where would they even start?
I think it's intimidating to start because there's no clear pathway. I still am not even sure of the pathway. A lot of them have come through people that I have known who have found themselves in positions of power and then have been like, hi, Allison, we made it. Come join us. Right. And so I think a lot of it is, especially when you're getting started, is building really like genuine relationships and friendships with people, because you just never know where they're going to be. That it does not mean that you have to be friends with people who are cruel to you. Sometimes theater teaches you that at any cost, you just got to make the connection. I disagree with that. You know, something that's going to hurt you is a bridge worth burning, first off. But so finding yourself, making genuine connections with people who you want to work with and who, you know, have the same values as you and are going to align. Fellowships, internships, if you can get them, if you can afford them. I couldn't. So it was really, I couldn't take work that wasn't going to pay me or house me. And so those were less for me. If you're in college and you can participate in the Kennedy Center College Theater Festival, it changed my life. It's just such a kind, supportive group that saw me and they were like, how do we nourish this person and uplift them? And it changed my life. It gave me so much confidence, and they really helped put me into rooms that helped me later on down the line in ways that I never expected, and also just made some amazing friends who are just doing some awesome stuff. It's also hard because it's hard to like Google directing jobs, right? Because a lot of them come from people that people already know. So they're out there. Playbill will post them. So like you can be like, somebody in Massachusetts wants somebody to come direct Mary Poppins, right? And you can be like, that's me. We have a union, SDC. They have a job board. So I think it's $100 a year for their associate membership. And then once you start directing like equity level, then you have to bump up a level. But you can Google all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm at the associate, so I'm not at the big guns yet.
Yeah.
But there's those ways, and then self-producing. It's thankless and it's unpaid most of the time, right? Because you're doing it from your own heart. But it's just such an awesome way to meet new people, to get your work out there, and just to have a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So that's always a route too, if you can do it. Some people can't though, and that's okay.
Can you, just as someone who's a little unfamiliar with the term self-producing, what does that mean?
It means doing it all on your own.
Okay.
So it means like you're like, I want to do. I'm losing every play that I've ever read. You're like, I want to do The Wolves, which is a play about a soccer team. It means that you're finding everybody, you're finding the space, you're doing everything that your producing team would do. You're doing it on your own.
Okay.
So I made a new play with two friends of mine, and it was self-produced. So we wrote the whole thing. We did the whole set on our own, the costumes on our own. We got somebody to donate their back porch for us to do it at like midnight, because the play was meant to scare people.
Okay.
But we had to do that all on our own. So when you get hired by a theater, they oftentimes will bring in your scenic designer, costume designer. They already have the space, they have the timeline, and they know their budget. Where when you're self-producing, depending on how privileged you are financially, you might have like $1. I think for A League of Her Own, we spent like $20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Would you recommend self-producing being a means of building your portfolio? Because you mentioned how networking and making those connections are so important to, getting the next opportunity, but even trying to, let's say, make a name for yourself and have some experience under your belt that you could essentially pitch to the people that you work with, like, where does that process start?
Oh yeah, I mean, self-producing is a great way to do that. To be like, hi, here is who I am. You can trust me with your resources. And here's just the product that I generally can make. I also think for some people, starting with community theater is also a great route. A lot of community theaters will bring in directors to do their plays and their musicals, and you don't always have to have the pedigree that some other people do for it. I have seen wonderful people who never went to school for theater direct community theater shows, and that's also a great place to start.
Along with that, what have you found, let's say, the most interesting or most surprising about, kind of the life that you're living right now? Like you said, working in, nonprofit, writing your book. Now you have the Simply Sapphic podcast, and you're doing all these other facets. Like, looking back on this, even let's say 5-10 years ago, would you have seen yourself doing all the things that you do now? No.
And that's what's so cool. That's what I love about like leaving room for surprises in your life and not chokeholding yourself into one specific vision. Because no, I never thought my partner and I would start a Sapphic podcast. It's called Simply Sapphic. But it's so exciting that it's like, oh my gosh, this is possible, and this aligns with our values. Like, and this is like a mission that we have in life, is like uplift queer folks, especially Sapphic folks. Same with the book. I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to write a book. I thought it was going to be a romance fantasy book, but it just ended up being a poetry autobiography, which is also exciting and fulfilling. And I never thought I would live in Austin. And when I first told my friends in Washington I was moving to Texas, all of them were freaked out. They were like scary. And I was like, we're going to do it. And I've just met some wonderful people here, and I found such a home here, and that never would have happened if I didn't let myself be surprised.
Yeah. What do you think professionally and career-wise has been the most surprising for you, or like opportunity that you never thought that you would get?
Oh, getting into graduate school. I went into graduate school immediately out of undergrad, and at that time it was conveyed to me that would be a very challenging thing because I was so young. And it was. I also had like $2 to my name, and graduate school applications are expensive, like $100, $150 to $200. And so I like saved up for like a year, and I was like, I can apply to 6 schools. And all of them told me no except one, the last one. And most of them, because I would ask for feedback and they were all like, you're just too young. They're like, you're just too young. And I was like, I don't think I'm too young. And so then when I got told the yes from the last one, I like collapsed into tears. I was like, oh, this is happening. Like, and that was I think the biggest surprise.
So looking into the life that you currently live right now, how do you balance it all?
Oh, it's constant change. I have to really keep a pulse on burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I've had at the time, like just through life, I've had to learn like what my burnout symptoms are and what leads to it. And I've had to learn how to prioritize certain key things. Like I have to prioritize sleep.
Yes.
I have to. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, my anxiety, I am not the best person. I'm like a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to feel that way. So I'm like, okay, this is something that I got to learn how to say no if it's going to impact my sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's what it is. It's learning how to say no to things, and it's learning how to clock your burnout and how to nourish yourself to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think part of that is saying no. So there's things that I've been like, nope, I can't do that. I would love to, but at a different time. I am notorious for taking on too many projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still, to this day, am having to learn how to be like, okay, too many things at once. Like this last year, I started this job with Hill Country Ride for AIDS,
mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful organization and you should check it out. And at the same time, I was directing in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was preparing to do another show 2 days after I got back. And we had started the podcast.
Oh my gosh.
And there was a good moment. And then just life things happened. Like I had a relative die, and there was a big moment in Nebraska where I had like a full-on breakdown.
Oh man.
I was like, too much. But knowing that, I was like, okay, bit off more than we can chew. We're here now though. What do I do to help keep going? And it was like, all right, rely on your community, ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for help. There'd be times I'd text Amanda, be like, please make me dinner. She's like, yeah, I'm making you dinner right now. Things like that.
Yeah.
In the past, I remember once I had done the same thing. I'd bitten off more than I could chew, and I was working way too much, and my friend was feeding me while I was typing.
Oh, no.
I was like, God. And she was like, eat the bagel. And I was like, thank you. Things like that. But I think now I've gotten better at saying no to things, because I think also sometimes in theater we're scarcity model in the arts.
Yes.
If you say no, it's the end of your career.
Right.
You're missing an opportunity. You're never going to get anything back. That's not true. Chances are abundant, and it's not worth saying yes to something and then burning out and
mm-hmm.
then crashing and not being able to do your best anyway.
Yeah.
So it's okay just to say no to things. Allison, like say no to things.
Yeah. And so with that, and being able to, in a way, have the privilege to say no, like what goes into you being able to create a sustainable life for yourself?
Oh my goodness. I think sometimes in the arts, there's a fear of having to get a job, like a real person job.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of that. I thought that would ruin my life. I was like, well, it can't happen. Artists have to be dedicated, and this can be the only thing that they can do. That's not realistic. You need health insurance. You do. We live in the United States. You need health insurance.
Yeah.
You need to be able to go to the doctor. I can't afford to pay for that out of pocket. That's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding a job that hopefully you can love as well, and finding a way that you can transfer your skills into that. I'm very fortunate to be working with like the nicest group of human beings that just like want to help change the world in very similar ways that I want to. And then I just think like building a strong support group around you, as strong as you can. I know for a lot of like queer folks, like family is not an option. So building your own family can really help with things like that, and can make this sustainable. And also like really learning, oh my goodness, just how to encourage yourself as you go. Yeah. There's low times, and looking at that and being like, that does not mean you're worthless. That does not mean you're failing. Like, it means that you are putting in the work, and the universe will reward you. So just keep going, like keep loving yourself, keep figuring it out.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about to wrap up here. So before we do, I have a couple lasting questions for you. One being, looking back, kind of at your younger self, and let's say it was when you were directing your sister, what advice would you have given your younger self now knowing the knowledge that you have today?
Oh, I would tell myself not to be so afraid of letting go of control. I would tell Allison, I would say, hey, the world is not as scary as it feels. You're going to have a lot of great moments in your life. It's okay to let go and to let things surprise you. Yeah, and I was really anxious as a kid. I was so scared of everything. So everything felt really, really intimidating. And I think I would just tell them like, oh, it's so silly just say that it's all going to be okay, but it is. And there are things that people are going to say about you that are weaknesses are your strengths, and don't ever waver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then one last question is, for our listeners and viewers who want to enter a similar path, specifically into directing, what biggest pieces of advice and takeaways would you want to leave them with?
Stand strong with your values. If you're like, I'm a kind, collaborative director, stand strong with that. Don't let anybody make you feel that is a bad thing, because it's not. Create. A lot of the arts are the friends that you make along the way. So don't be afraid to make friends. And I would say just know that whatever you create is already worthy as it is, and you are worthy as you are. No matter what point in your journey you're in, you're worthy. You are worth being in the room and having your voice heard. And when that imposter syndrome comes on in, it's okay to talk to it and say, hey, I hear you, but we deserve being in this room just as much as anybody else. So apply for that school that you want to apply for. Reach out to that director and ask to work with them. Ask your friends to put on a play with you. Do whatever you feel you need to do to make it happen, and it'll happen.
That's amazing. Well, Thank you so much for being on the show. Where can our listeners and viewers find you? Any social media, podcast stuff, book stuff that you want to plug?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So my Instagram is Allison Price Director. Pretty straightforward. If you want to listen to the podcast, our podcast is Simply Sapphic, and you can find us at Simply Sapphic Podcast on Instagram. And then if you want to read my book, you can find it on trustfallcollaborations.com. It's called Just Another Dead Daughter.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Yay.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Femme Forte. I hope this conversation left you feeling inspired, empowered, and just a little more connected to your own creative journey. Be sure to follow today's guests and support the incredible work they're doing. You can find all their links in the episode description. And if you enjoy this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend, leave a rating or review, and follow Femme Forte wherever you get your podcasts.